You can know thousands of English words and still feel completely lost the moment a real conversation begins. Because knowing English and using English are not the same skill. One lives in your head. The other has to come out under pressure, in real time, with no pause button and no perfect answer waiting for you. And if you have spent years studying English but still hesitate, freeze, or overthink simple conversations, the problem may not be your English at all. The problem may be the way you have been training it. 1. Accept when someone has already left in their heart. One of the hardest truths to accept is that a person can still be physically present while emotionally they have already gone. They may still answer your messages. They may still speak to you from time to time. They may still leave the door slightly open. But deep inside, something has changed. Their effort has become smaller. Their warmth has become weaker. Their attention has become inconsistent. Their presence has become uncertain. And yet, because you remember what the relationship once was, you keep trying to restore something that may no longer exist in the same form. Buddhist wisdom begins with seeing reality as it is, not as you desperately want it to be. Suffering increases when the mind refuses to accept what life is clearly showing. You may tell yourself that if you explain one more time, love a little harder, become more patient, become more understanding, or prove your worth, then perhaps the person will return emotionally. But love cannot be forced back into someone. Interest cannot be negotiated. Loyalty cannot be begged into existence. Connection cannot survive when only one person is carrying it. This does not mean you should become cynical. It does not mean you should assume every difficult period means someone no longer cares. Relationships naturally go through distance, stress, misunderstanding, and change. But there is a difference between a temporary difficulty and a repeated pattern of withdrawal. A temporary difficulty still contains mutual effort. A repeated pattern of withdrawal leaves you doing all the reaching, all the explaining, all the forgiving, all the waiting, and all the hoping. The mind often resists this truth because acceptance feels like defeat. You think, if I accept that they are leaving, then I am giving up. But acceptance is not surrendering your dignity. Acceptance is refusing to argue with reality. If someone wants distance, you can respect it. If someone has changed, you can acknowledge it. If someone no longer gives what they once gave, you do not have to pretend otherwise. The Buddha taught that clinging is one of the roots of suffering. Clinging does not only mean holding on to objects. It also means holding on to identities, expectations, memories, relationships, and imagined futures. You cling to who someone used to be. You cling to how they once treated you. You cling to the promises they once made. You cling to the future you pictured together. Then the present begins to contradict that image, and your suffering comes from the gap between what is happening and what you are refusing to release. You may say, "But they told me they would never leave." Human beings speak from the feelings they have in a certain moment. Feelings change. Circumstances change. People change. Sometimes promises are broken because people are careless. Sometimes because they are selfish. Sometimes because they genuinely believed what they said at the time, but later became different. None of this makes the pain small. But your healing cannot depend on forcing yesterday's words to control today's reality. A Buddhist approach asks a different question. Instead of asking, "How can I make them become who they used to be?" ask, "What is actually happening now?" Look without decorating the truth. Are they showing up? Are they making space for you? Are they communicating honestly? Are they treating you with care? Are they choosing the connection freely? If the answer repeatedly becomes no, then your path is not to become more persuasive. Your path is to become more aware. There is enormous strength in quietly recognizing when your effort is no longer being met. You do not need to create a dramatic ending. You do not need to punish them. You do not need to make them feel guilty. You do not need to send a final message designed to make them regret losing you. Those actions often come from the same attachment. They still place your attention on whether the other person finally understands your value. True release is quieter. You see what is happening and stop resisting it. You stop trying to convince someone to remain where they no longer want to stand. You stop treating their distance like a challenge you must overcome. You stop turning their indecision into your daily emotional prison. This can be especially difficult when the person leaves slowly. A clear goodbye is painful, but uncertainty can be worse. One day they are warm, the next they are cold. One week they seem interested, the next week they disappear. This inconsistency keeps hope alive because the mind focuses on the best moments and ignores the pattern. You tell yourself, maybe they are coming back. But occasional attention is not the same as steady care. A few kind messages do not erase months of neglect. A moment of affection does not automatically restore trust. In Buddhism, mindfulness means observing without becoming lost in what you observe. You notice the warmth, and you notice the distance. You notice your hope, and you notice your fear. You do not let one pleasant moment erase the larger truth. This protects you from being controlled by fragments. If someone has already let you go in their heart, your deepest act of self-respect is not to grip them tighter. It is to loosen your own hand. You may still care. You may still miss them. You may still wish things had been different. Let those feelings exist without turning them into commands. Missing someone does not mean you must chase them. Loving someone does not mean you must abandon yourself. Feeling sadness does not mean you made the wrong decision by stepping away. The mind says, I cannot accept this because I still love them. But acceptance and love are not opposites. You can love someone and still accept that the relationship is no longer healthy. You can care deeply and still walk away. You can be grateful for what existed and still stop demanding that it continue forever. Impermanence is not a punishment, it is the nature of life. Every meeting contains the possibility of separation. Every beginning carries change within it. This truth is not meant to make you fearful of connection. It is meant to help you love without possession. When you understand impermanence, you stop saying, this person must remain exactly as they are so that I can feel secure. You begin to appreciate what is present while knowing it cannot be controlled. When someone has already let you go, do not make your suffering larger by refusing to release the image of the past. Look at what is here now. Honor the truth. Let reality speak louder than memory. You do not have to hate them. You do not have to erase the good. You simply stop demanding that what has changed become unchanged for your comfort. Sometimes the first step toward freedom is the sentence you were afraid to admit. This is not what it used to be. Once you can say that without bargaining, the door to clarity opens, and clarity is the beginning of letting go. Lesson 2. Stop begging for what should be given freely. Begging does not always look like getting on your knees and asking someone to stay. Often it is much more subtle. It is sending one more message after being ignored. It is repeatedly asking, are you sure everything is okay, when their actions have already answered the question. It is explaining your worth to someone who keeps treating you as optional. It is lowering your standards because you are afraid that asking for mutual respect will make them leave. It is accepting crumbs because you are terrified of having nothing. The deepest problem with begging is not that it makes you look weak. The deeper problem is that it trains your mind to believe that love, attention, respect, and basic consideration must be earned through self-abandonment. Buddhist wisdom teaches that suffering grows from craving. Craving says, I must have this in order to be whole. Once your mind attaches your worth to another person's response, their behavior gains enormous control over your inner world. A delayed message changes your mood. Their approval becomes a reward. Their silence becomes punishment. Their attention becomes proof that you matter. Their distance becomes proof that you do not. This is a dangerous way to live because your emotional stability is now being handed to someone who may not even be handling their own mind carefully. You must understand the difference between expressing a need and begging for a need. Healthy relationships require communication. It is reasonable to say, "I need honesty." It is reasonable to say, "This behavior hurts me." It is reasonable to ask for clarity. But if you have communicated the same need repeatedly and nothing changes, continuing to plead does not create intimacy. It creates humiliation and resentment. There comes a point when repeating yourself is no longer communication. It is evidence that the other person heard you and chose not to respond in the way you hoped. The ego often tries to turn rejection into a problem of strategy. It says, "Maybe I need better words. Maybe I need to be more patient. Maybe if I become less emotional, more attractive, more successful, more useful, more available, they will finally choose me." But this thinking can trap you for years. You begin reshaping your entire identity around gaining the approval of one person. Buddhist practice asks you to observe desire without automatically obeying it. You may strongly want someone to value you, but wanting does not make that value available. You may want an apology, but the other person may never give it. You may want closure, but they may never explain themselves. You may want them to recognize what they lost, but they may move on without looking back. If your healing depends on receiving these things, then your healing remains in their hands. Release begins when you stop asking another person to provide what your own awareness can begin to restore: dignity, clarity, steadiness, and self-respect. Suppose someone repeatedly cancels plans with you, but expects you to be available whenever they want. You tell them it hurts. They apologize. Then do it again. You explain again. They say you are overreacting. Now you have information. The issue is no longer whether they understand. The issue is whether you are willing to keep participating in a pattern that tells you clearly where you stand. At that moment, strength does not mean finding the perfect sentence that changes them. Strength may mean reducing access. It may mean no longer rearranging your life for someone who treats your time casually. It may mean stopping the cycle without needing their permission. Many people beg because they confuse persistence with love. They believe, if I truly love someone, I should fight for them. But fighting for a relationship only makes sense when both people are fighting for the relationship. If one person is fighting for connection while the other is fighting for distance, what you call devotion may actually be attachment. Love is not proven by how much disrespect you can tolerate. Compassion also does not require you to remain in a situation that repeatedly harms you. Buddhism values compassion deeply, but compassion includes wisdom. Without wisdom, compassion can become self-neglect. You can understand why someone behaves the way they do without volunteering to be mistreated by them. You can recognize their wounds without becoming responsible for carrying them. Someone may have a difficult past. They may fear intimacy. They may struggle with communication. They may be emotionally confused. All of that can be true, and you can still decide that the relationship is not healthy for you. You do not need to make them a villain in order to stop begging. This is important because people often remain attached by turning the relationship into a moral courtroom. They keep asking, who was right, who was wrong, who hurt whom more? But freedom does not always require a verdict. Sometimes two people are simply unable to meet each other in a healthy way. Sometimes one person wants more than the other can give. Sometimes timing is wrong. Sometimes trust has been damaged too deeply. The mind wants a dramatic reason because drama makes separation feel justified. But sometimes this no longer works, is enough. When you stop begging, you may initially feel an emptiness. That emptiness can be frightening because your habits were built around pursuit. You checked your phone, you reread messages, you watched their behavior, you imagined conversations, you waited for signs. When you stop, suddenly there is open space. Do not rush to fill that space with another person. Sit with it. Let the nervous energy settle. Notice how often your mind reaches outward for reassurance. This is where practice begins. Ask yourself, what am I actually craving right now? Is it the person, or is it validation? Is it closeness? Is it certainty? Is it the feeling of being chosen? Is it relief from loneliness? Once you identify the deeper craving, you become less hypnotized by the individual. Perhaps you do not miss the person as much as you miss who you were when you felt wanted by them. Perhaps you do not miss the relationship as much as you miss the imagined future. Perhaps you do not want them back as much as you want the rejection reversed. These realizations are painful, but they are liberating. Stop begging for people to see what they repeatedly refuse to see. Stop begging for effort from someone who gives it only when they fear losing access to you. Stop begging for clear intentions from someone who benefits from keeping you uncertain. Stop begging for basic kindness as if it is a luxury. What is freely given carries a different energy from what is extracted through pressure. Genuine care does not need constant persuasion. Genuine respect does not need endless reminders. Genuine interest does not survive only when you threaten to leave. Let your silence become an act of understanding, not manipulation. Do not stop begging so they will chase you. Stop begging because you finally understand that your worth should not depend on whether they return. The moment you stop pleading for someone to choose you, you begin choosing yourself. Lesson 3. Stop chasing closure from the person who created the confusion. One of the most common reasons people cannot let go is that they are waiting for closure. They want one final conversation, one honest explanation, one answer that makes everything fit together. They believe that if the other person would only tell the truth, admit what happened, apologize properly, or explain why they changed, then the mind could finally rest. But closure is often misunderstood. Closure is not always information. Sometimes it is acceptance. The person who confused you may never become the person who clarifies everything. The person who avoided accountability may not suddenly become deeply self-aware. The person who disappeared without explanation may not return with a satisfying reason. And even if they do explain, the answer may not relieve you the way you imagine. The mind creates a fantasy. If I knew why, I would stop hurting. But pain is not always caused by missing information. Sometimes it is caused by attachment to a preferred outcome. Imagine that someone ends a relationship and says, "I just don't feel the same anymore." You may ask why. They may say they do not know. Your mind becomes furious because the explanation feels incomplete. But perhaps the truth is exactly that simple. Feelings changed. There was no dramatic event. There may be no hidden secret. Yet because your mind dislikes uncertainty, it searches for a deeper story. The search can become endless. You analyze every conversation. You examine every mistake. You ask friends what they think happened. You revisit old memories looking for clues. You check social media for evidence. You build theories. Each theory gives you a temporary sense of control, but no theory changes the present. Buddhist teachings repeatedly point toward direct experience. What is happening now? Right now, the relationship has changed. Right now, you are hurting. Right now, your mind is reaching backward. Right now, uncertainty is uncomfortable. These are the realities you can actually work with. The past cannot be repaired inside your imagination. Closure becomes possible when you stop asking the past to become different. This does not mean truth is unimportant. If you can have a respectful, honest conversation, that may be helpful. But you must know when the search for answers has become another form of chasing. You ask the same question in different words. You send messages hoping for a different response. You keep returning because you want them to validate your version of what happened. You want them to admit they hurt you in exactly the way you experienced it. When they do not, you feel that the story remains unfinished. But another person does not have to agree with your pain for your pain to be real. You can say, "What happened hurt me. I learned from it. I do not need them to confirm every detail before I move forward." This is emotional maturity. The Buddha often emphasized that suffering comes not only from unpleasant experiences, but from the mind's resistance to them. You experience rejection, and then the mind adds, "This should not have happened." You experience betrayal, And the mind adds, I need them to understand what they did. You experience abandonment, and the mind adds, I cannot move on until I know why. Each added sentence becomes another layer of suffering. Try removing the demand. It happened. It hurt. I may never fully understand it. I can still continue. Notice how much lighter that becomes. Many people are afraid that creating their own closure means letting the other person escape responsibility. It does not. You are not declaring them innocent. You are declaring that your life will no longer be held hostage by their willingness to explain themselves. Responsibility belongs to them. Freedom belongs to you. There may also be moments when the other person gives you closure, but you reject it because it is not the answer you wanted. They say they do not want the relationship. You continue asking because you want to hear that they are confused. They say they have moved on. You keep searching for signs that they still care. They tell you they cannot give you what you need. You interpret small acts of kindness as hidden evidence that they secretly want you back. At that point, the problem is not lack of closure. The problem is refusal to accept closure. This is where mindfulness becomes powerful. When the mind begins creating stories, label them gently. Hope, fear, memory, fantasy, resistance. You do not need to attack yourself for thinking these thoughts. You simply stop treating every thought as truth. A thought such as, maybe they will come back, is not a prophecy. It is a mental event. A thought such as, I will never find someone like them, is not a fact. It is fear speaking through comparison. A thought such as, I wasted years, may not be entirely true either. Painful experiences can still teach you. You may have learned your boundaries. You may have learned what emotional inconsistency feels like. You may have learned how easily you abandon yourself when afraid of losing someone. These lessons are not a reason to celebrate suffering, but they allow suffering to become useful. Closure can come through understanding your own part, without taking responsibility for everything. Ask, what did I ignore? What did I tolerate? What did I refuse to see? Where did I betray my own needs? What would I do differently now? These questions are far more powerful than endlessly asking, why did they do this to me? The first question returns power to you. The second can keep you trapped in their psychology forever. You may never understand why another person behaved as they did. Human beings are complicated. Some act from fear, some from immaturity, some from selfishness, some from confusion, some from patterns they barely understand themselves. You do not need to solve them. Your task is to understand your own mind well enough that the same kind of confusion does not continue controlling your life. Closure is the day you stop reopening the same emotional wound just to see if it still hurts. Closure is deleting the unfinished speech you keep rehearsing in your head. Closure is accepting that some conversations will never happen. Closure is understanding that silence is also an answer. Closure is realizing that a person's inability to love you in the way you hoped is not proof that you are unlovable. Closure is not the other person turning around. Closure is you finally turning forward. Lesson 4. Release the fantasy of who they could have been. Sometimes you are not holding on to the person, you are holding on to their potential. You saw glimpses of kindness, depth, warmth, intelligence, tenderness, or loyalty. You thought, if they heal, if they mature, if they become more consistent, if they stop being afraid, this could become something beautiful. Then you begin loving not only who they are, but who you believe they might someday become. This creates one of the strongest forms of attachment because potential has no clear limit. Reality can disappoint you again and again, but imagination can keep improving the person. You remember the moments when they were thoughtful. You minimize the moments when they were cruel. You remember their promises. You overlook their repeated behavior. You remember who they were at the beginning. You excuse who they became later. The relationship starts living more in your mind than in your actual life. Buddhist wisdom teaches us to see clearly. Clear seeing means observing what is present without adding what you wish were present. If someone is inconsistent, see inconsistency. If someone avoids responsibility, see avoidance. If someone repeatedly breaks trust, see the broken trust. Compassion does not mean turning facts into fantasies. You can understand why someone behaves badly and still accept that the behavior is bad for you. This is especially important when someone gives you enough good moments to keep hope alive. They may apologize sincerely. They may become loving after conflict. They may promise change when they feel you pulling away. For a while, everything improves. Then the old pattern returns. You begin to live from apology to apology. Each apology becomes evidence of the person they could be. Each repeated behavior becomes evidence of the person they currently are. Wisdom asks you to give greater weight to patterns than to promises. Words reveal intention. Patterns reveal capacity. A person may truly intend to change and still lack the capacity to do so right now. That is painful, because it means they may not be lying when they promise improvement. They may mean it, but sincere intention does not automatically create a healthy relationship. This is where people often become trapped by sympathy. You think, they are trying, and perhaps they are, but you must also ask, is this relationship still harming me while they try? You are allowed to care about someone's growth without making your life the place where they practice hurting and apologizing. Buddhism does not ask you to become cold, it asks you to become awake. Awareness notices when hope becomes denial. Imagine a person who says they want commitment, but repeatedly disappears whenever the relationship becomes serious. You keep waiting because you believe they are afraid. You tell yourself that once they feel safe enough, they will stay. Perhaps that is true. Perhaps one day they will change. But you cannot build your present life around someone else's possible future transformation. You must respond to the version of them that exists now. This principle can feel harsh, because attachment speaks in possibility. What if they become better after I leave? What if I walk away just before everything changes? What if they finally understand? These questions keep you standing at a closed door, because you are imagining what might happen behind it. But life is not lived in what if. If someone changes later, that is their path. If circumstances bring you together again in a healthier form, you can evaluate that reality when it exists. You do not need to keep suffering today, because tomorrow might be different. This is the meaning of non-attachment. Non-attachment is not refusing to care. It is refusing to demand that the future obey your desire. Let people become who they become. You do not need to supervise their growth. You do not need to remain emotionally available just in case they finally mature. You do not need to delay your own life because someone else is still deciding how they feel. Sometimes you also hold on to your own potential inside the relationship. You think, maybe if I become calmer, more patient, less demanding, more attractive, more successful, then they will treat me better. You begin treating yourself like a project whose goal is to become impossible to reject. This is another illusion. Healthy relationships do encourage growth, but growth should not require erasing yourself. If your entire improvement is motivated by fear of abandonment, then even positive change can become another form of attachment. You deserve to grow because growth matters to you, not because you are auditioning for someone's love. Look at the relationship as though you were advising someone you care about. Remove the fantasy, remove the history, remove the promises. What remains? How does the person actually behave? How do you feel most of the time? Are you expanding or shrinking? Are you becoming clearer or more confused? Are you respected or repeatedly destabilized? These questions cut through potential. You may discover that your grief is not only about losing the person. You are grieving the future you built around them, the trips you imagined, the home you imagined, the version of yourself you imagined becoming beside them, the conversations you thought you would have, the years you thought you would share. That future felt emotionally real, even though it never fully existed. Allow yourself to grieve it. Do not mock yourself for believing. Do not shame yourself for hoping. But also do not keep worshipping an unrealized future after reality has clearly changed. The mind may say, but it could have been beautiful. Yes, many things could have been beautiful. That does not mean they were meant to continue. A flower can fail to bloom because the conditions are wrong. You do not scream at the soil. You do not force the petals open. You accept that conditions matter. Relationships also depend on conditions: timing, maturity, values, honesty, emotional capacity, mutual effort, willingness, and responsibility. Love alone cannot always overcome the absence of these conditions. Release the fantasy gently. You do not need to destroy your good memories. You do not need to rewrite the person as terrible. Simply place them back into reality. They were not only who you hoped they would become, they were also who they repeatedly showed themselves to be. Freedom begins when you stop loving a possibility more than you respect the truth. Lesson 5. Let the pain move through you without turning it into pursuit. When someone lets you go, pain naturally arises. The body can feel it before the mind even understands it. Your chest tightens, your stomach feels heavy, sleep becomes difficult, appetite changes. Ordinary places suddenly contain memories, songs become dangerous, silence becomes loud. This pain can create an urgent desire to do something. Call them, message them, check their profile, ask a friend about them, look at old photos, write a long explanation, drive past a familiar place. Search for evidence that they miss you. The mind says action will reduce pain. Sometimes it reduces pain for 10 minutes and strengthens attachment for 10 more days. Buddhist practice offers another approach. Feel the pain without automatically turning it into behavior. This is difficult because most people have not learned how to sit with emotional discomfort. They know how to distract, chase, suppress, overthink, drink, scroll, rebound, work excessively, or seek reassurance. But simply allowing sadness to exist can feel unbearable. Yet feelings are impermanent too. No emotion remains at maximum intensity forever unless the mind repeatedly feeds it. Think of a wave. A wave rises, reaches a peak, and falls. Grief behaves similarly. But when the wave rises, you may panic and begin adding thoughts. I cannot handle this. I need them. I am alone. They were my only chance. I will always feel this way. These thoughts become wind that keeps the wave alive. Mindfulness asks you to separate sensation from story. What do you actually feel in the body? Tightness, heat, pressure, restlessness, tears, hollow space. Notice these directly, then notice the story. They should be here. I need an answer. I need to know if they miss me. I need them back. The sensation is painful. The story often multiplies the pain. Try sitting quietly when the urge to contact them appears. Do not immediately obey. Give the urge a name: wanting, fear, loneliness, craving, panic. Then breathe and watch. You may notice the urge changes every few minutes. It becomes stronger, then weaker. This teaches you something crucial. You do not have to act on every emotional impulse. Freedom begins in the gap between feeling and action. When you chase someone every time pain appears, your nervous system learns, I cannot survive discomfort without reaching for this person. This makes attachment stronger. When you feel discomfort and remain with yourself, your nervous system slowly learns, this hurts, but I can stay. That is a profound form of healing. Do not confuse this with emotional suppression. You are not telling yourself not to care. You are not pretending to be unaffected. You are allowing the grief to exist while refusing to let grief control your behavior. Cry if you need to cry. Write what you feel, but do not automatically send it. Talk to someone trustworthy, but do not turn every conversation into another strategy for getting the person back. Walk, sit, pray if that is part of your life. Meditate, rest, eat properly, return to simple routines. Give your body evidence that life continues. The mind wants dramatic solutions because heartbreak feels dramatic. But healing often happens through ordinary acts. You wake up and do not check their page. You eat breakfast even when your appetite is small. You go outside. You complete your responsibilities. You have 1 hour when you do not think about them, then 2 hours, then one afternoon. Eventually you remember them without immediately collapsing into longing. This process cannot be rushed. Buddhism teaches patience with the mind. You would not yell at muddy water for taking time to settle. You leave it undisturbed. Slowly the sediment falls. Your mind also needs periods of being left undisturbed. Constantly checking the person is like stirring the water every 5 minutes and then asking why it is still cloudy. Each new piece of information restarts the process. They post a photo. Your mind creates a story. They like something. Your mind creates another story. They appear happy. You compare. They appear sad. You hope. None of this is neutral while you are still deeply attached. Distance can be medicine. You may need to unfollow, mute, archive, delete, or create practical boundaries. This is not childish if it is done to protect your attention rather than punish the other person. Do not turn boundaries into theater. You do not need to announce every action. You do not need to block someone and then wait to see if they notice. You do not need to post things designed to make them jealous. That is still pursuit in another costume. Real distance is quiet. You stop feeding the attachment because you want to become free, not because you want to provoke a reaction. There may be evenings when you feel you have made no progress. One memory appears and suddenly the sadness returns strongly. Do not interpret this as failure. Healing is not a straight line. A memory can activate old pain even after months of improvement. The question is not whether pain ever returns. The question is whether you still abandon yourself when it does. Each time you feel the emotion without chasing, you weaken the old pattern. Each time you let the urge pass, you build trust in yourself. Each time you choose dignity over panic, the attachment loses a little power. Eventually, you understand something surprising. The pain was not asking you to run back. It was asking you to stay with yourself. You were chasing the person because you did not yet know how to accompany your own suffering. Learn that skill. Sit beside your own grief. Do not make the person who left responsible for rescuing you from the pain of their leaving. The pain will move. Everything moves. Let it pass through you without becoming your direction. Lesson 6. Do not turn letting go into a performance. Sometimes people decide to let go, but they still want the other person to witness it. They post quotes about betrayal. They suddenly become extremely active online. They share photographs designed to look happier than they feel. They mention new friendships. They dress their silence as a message. They hope the other person notices the change and thinks, "I made a mistake." This is not complete letting go. It is still a relationship with the other person, only now the relationship exists through reaction. You are still asking, what will they think? Buddhist wisdom invites you to observe the ego carefully. The ego does not only want love, it also wants recognition. When love is lost, the ego often seeks revenge through success, indifference, appearance, status, or replacement. You say, "I will show them what they lost." But who are you still living for? If your transformation depends on their regret, then they remain at the center of your life. True release is when you improve and do not need them to know. You become stronger because strength matters. You become healthier because your body matters. You become more disciplined because your life matters. You build new friendships because connection matters. You travel because experience matters. You grow because growth itself becomes meaningful. There is a huge difference between healing and performing healing. Performance is restless. It keeps checking the audience. Healing becomes less interested in being seen. This applies not only online. You may perform indifference in person. You act cold because you want to appear unaffected. You refuse to speak because you want them to feel punished. You make sure they know you have options. You pretend not to care, while secretly measuring every reaction. The opposite of attachment is not dramatic coldness. The opposite of attachment is freedom. Freedom may look ordinary. If you see them, you can be civil. If a boundary is needed, you keep it. If there is nothing to say, you do not force conversation. You are not trying to impress or punish. You become less reactive because their opinion is losing importance. This is difficult because part of you may want justice. You want them to hurt the way you hurt. You want them to realize you are valuable. You want them to experience your absence. These desires are understandable, but feeding them keeps you tied to the person. Ask yourself, if they never regret losing me, can I still move forward? That question exposes your attachment. If the answer is no, then your healing is still dependent on their future emotional experience. You cannot control whether someone regrets leaving. Some people do, some do not. Some regret it years later. Some quickly justify their decision and never look back. Some miss you but still choose not to return. Some return for reasons that have nothing to do with genuine change. None of these possibilities should determine whether you rebuild your life. Buddhism teaches karma not as a tool for revenge, but as the principle that actions have consequences. You do not need to personally deliver every consequence. If someone repeatedly behaves carelessly, that behavior shapes their character and future relationships. Your task is not to become the judge who ensures they suffer enough. Your task is to stop creating new suffering inside yourself. Resentment often feels like strength because it is more energizing than grief. Sadness says, I lost something. Anger says, I will make them pay. Anger can make you feel powerful for a while, but long-term resentment becomes another chain. You wake up thinking about them. You tell the story repeatedly. You imagine arguments. You fantasize about their failure. You compare your progress to theirs. How is that freedom? You have physically left, but mentally continued the relationship. Letting go requires withdrawing attention from the courtroom. You do not need to prove you were the better person. You do not need everyone to agree that they were wrong. You do not need to win the breakup. You do not need to become visibly more successful than them. There is no medal for suffering more gracefully. There is only your life, moving forward or remaining tied to the past. Practice doing good things privately. Let your progress become invisible for a while. Build routines no one applauds. Learn something. Take care of your health. Reconnect with people you neglected. Clean your environment. Save money. Read. Meditate. Create. Do these things without turning them into messages. This is powerful because it changes the direction of your attention. Instead of asking, will this make them miss me? You ask, does this make my life more whole? Instead of asking, will they notice I am doing better? You ask, am I actually doing better? Those questions are completely different. A life built for revenge remains dependent on the person who hurt you. A life built from awareness becomes yours again. You may one day discover that the greatest sign you have let go is not that you can ignore them, it is that you no longer need them to notice your absence. Their regret becomes irrelevant. Their opinion becomes quieter. Their memory still exists, but it no longer directs your choices. That is when letting go stops being a performance and becomes freedom. Lesson 7. Forgive without reopening the door. Forgiveness is often misunderstood as reconciliation. People think that if they forgive, they must allow the person back into their life. They think compassion requires access. They think spiritual maturity means being endlessly available. This misunderstanding causes enormous confusion. You can forgive someone and still keep distance. You can release hatred and still maintain a boundary. You can wish someone well and still decide not to trust them again. Buddhist compassion is not the same as forgetting consequences. If a dog repeatedly bites you, compassion may mean understanding that the dog acts from fear or conditioning. Wisdom still tells you not to place your hand in its mouth. Human relationships also require discernment. Someone may apologize sincerely. That apology can matter. You may choose to forgive them internally. But trust is not rebuilt through words alone. Trust requires repeated evidence over time. Forgiveness can happen in a moment. Trust usually cannot. This distinction protects you from becoming trapped in cycles. Many people return to unhealthy relationships because they confuse forgiveness with reset. The other person says sorry, and everything returns to zero. The past is erased. Boundaries disappear. Access is restored. Then the same behavior happens again. Now resentment grows because forgiveness was used without wisdom. A Buddhist path asks you to release hatred because hatred burns the person carrying it. But release does not mean returning to the same conditions that produced suffering. Suppose someone repeatedly lies to you. Eventually you step away. Months later they apologize. You may genuinely feel compassion. You may understand that they were insecure or afraid. You may no longer wish them harm. None of that requires you to build your life around them again. You are allowed to say, "I forgive you, and I do not want to continue this relationship." Some people will call that cold. It is not cold, it is clear. The desire to be seen as kind can become another attachment. You fear being the bad person, so you keep giving chances long after trust has collapsed. You tell yourself that a spiritual person should be endlessly patient, but patience without boundaries can become permission. Buddhist ethics includes non-harming. This should include avoiding unnecessary harm to yourself as well. You do not practice compassion by volunteering for repeated emotional injury. You also do not need to hate the person in order to justify leaving. This is one of the most liberating truths. You can say, "They are not evil. They are simply not healthy for me." You can say, "I understand them, and I still choose distance." You can say, "I hope they grow, but I will not wait nearby while they decide whether to grow." These statements contain compassion and wisdom together. Forgiveness also does not require the other person to apologize. This may seem unfair. Why should you forgive someone who never admitted what they did? Because forgiveness is not a reward you give them. It is a burden you stop carrying. You do not forgive because they deserve access to you. You forgive because you no longer want their actions occupying your mind every day. This process can take time. Do not force forgiveness prematurely. If you are deeply hurt, pretending not to be angry is not spiritual. It is suppression. First, acknowledge what happened. Name the harm honestly. Allow the anger to show you where your boundaries were crossed. Then slowly release the need to keep feeding the anger. Forgiveness becomes natural when you realize that carrying hatred does not reverse the event. The past does not become fair because you remain furious. At some point, you choose your future over your grievance. You may still remember. Memory is not failure. You may still feel cautious. Caution is not bitterness. You may decide never to reconnect. Distance is not revenge when it is chosen calmly. The key is your intention. Are you keeping distance to punish them? Or are you keeping distance because you have learned what conditions allow you to live with clarity? The first keeps you attached. The second helps you move forward. There will be people who try to manipulate your spirituality. They may say, "If you really forgave me, you would talk to me." Or, "If you were truly compassionate, you would give me another chance." Do not confuse their desire for access with a moral command. Your boundary does not need their agreement. You can forgive privately. You can release them without ceremony. You can stop telling the story. You can stop hoping they suffer. You can stop checking whether life punished them. This is enough. Sometimes the cleanest ending is not hatred. It is neutral distance. The person becomes part of your past without remaining an enemy in your mind. You remember what you learned. You keep the boundary and you continue. That is forgiveness with wisdom. Lesson 8. Turn forward without looking back for permission. The final stage of letting go is not forgetting. It is turning forward. Many people physically move on while mentally remaining at the door. They start new routines. They meet new people. They make plans. But a part of them continues looking backward. Will they come back? Will they regret it? Will they apologize? Will they see that I changed? Will they finally understand what I meant? As long as your future is waiting for an answer from the past, part of you has not fully turned. Buddhist practice teaches presence. The present moment is where life is actually happening. Memory exists now as a mental image. Hope exists now as a mental projection. Fear exists now as a feeling. But the past itself is gone, and the future itself has not arrived. When you keep looking back, you sacrifice the only place where change is possible, now. Turning forward means accepting that the person may remain important in your history without remaining central in your future. This is not betrayal. You are not dishonoring what happened by continuing to live. You are not proving the relationship meant nothing. You are simply allowing life to move. Impermanence asks this from all of us. Every chapter ends. Childhood ends. Homes change, friendships change, bodies change, parents age, children grow, relationships begin and end, even identities change. The mind suffers when it demands permanent forms in an impermanent world. When you understand this deeply, letting go becomes less personal. You realize that separation is not uniquely happening to you. It is woven into the structure of existence. This does not remove grief, but it removes some of the injustice you attach to grief. You stop saying, "Why did life do this to me?" You begin saying, "Change has arrived. How will I meet it?" That question gives you direction. Look at what remains in your life, your body, your mind, your responsibilities, your abilities, your family or chosen community, your work, your spiritual practice, your unfinished goals, your curiosity, your capacity to learn, your ability to care again. Loss narrows attention. It makes one person seem like the entire landscape. Turning forward means widening the view. The person who left was part of your life. They were not the whole of life. This is easy to say and difficult to feel when attachment is strong. That is why you practice. Each day, return attention to what is still here. Do one thing that belongs to your future. Make one decision that is not about them. Spend 1 hour in a place that has no connection to them. Learn one new skill. Strengthen one relationship you neglected. Care for your home. Care for your health. Read something that changes your perspective. Sit quietly and watch your mind without following every memory. These actions appear small, but they gradually build a life that does not revolve around absence. You may fear that moving forward means you are closing the door forever. Perhaps you are not ready to think in permanent terms. You do not need to. You only need to stop standing in the doorway today. Today, do not chase. Today, do not beg. Today, do not reopen the conversation. Today, do not search for signs. Today, live the day that is actually in front of you. Tomorrow, practice again. This is how large emotional change happens, through repeated small acts of non-attachment. One day, you may discover you have gone several days without checking, then weeks. Then you hear their name and your body no longer reacts with the same intensity. The memory becomes softer, not erased, integrated. This is what healing often looks like. The story remains, but it stops demanding your attention. Do not measure progress by whether you never think about them. Measure progress by how quickly you return to yourself when you do. That is more realistic. There may also be a temptation to compare your healing to theirs. You see that they seem happy. You feel angry because you are still processing. Or you see that they are struggling and feel secretly relieved. Both reactions are signs that your attention is still partially tied to their path. Their path is theirs. Your path is yours. Do not use their apparent happiness as evidence that you lost. Do not use their pain as evidence that you won. These are ego games. The deeper victory is becoming less dependent on comparison. You may also meet someone new. Be careful not to make the new person responsible for proving that you are still lovable. Do not use them as medicine for the old wound. Let new relationships begin from presence rather than reaction. See the new person as themselves, not as an opposite of the one who left. This requires patience. You may need time alone to understand what happened. Solitude can become a place of rebuilding rather than punishment. In solitude, you hear your own preferences again. You notice how much of your life became organized around another person. You rediscover what you enjoy without needing to share it. You make choices without imagining how they will react. You become familiar with your own company. This is not isolation. It is recalibration. Eventually, letting go becomes less about losing someone and more about returning to yourself. You stop asking, "How do I get over them?" You begin asking, "What kind of life am I building now?" That is the question that turns you forward. Do not wait for permission. The person who left does not need to approve your healing. They do not need to understand your silence. They do not need to witness your growth. They do not need to apologize before you become whole again. You are allowed to continue without their participation. You are allowed to leave the unanswered questions unanswered. You are allowed to become a different person because of what you learned. You are allowed to remember the good without returning to the pain. You are allowed to care from a distance. You are allowed to close the chapter even if the final sentence was never spoken. And you are allowed to walk forward without looking back. Let them go without begging. Let them go without chasing. Let them go without trying to prove what they lost. Let them go without turning your heart into a courtroom. Let them go without hating them. Let them go without abandoning yourself. The Buddhist path does not ask you to become emotionless. It asks you to stop turning emotion into chains. You can feel deeply and still release. You can grieve and still continue. You can remember and still move forward. You can love what was and stop demanding that it return. This is not weakness. This is wisdom. When your hand finally opens, you may discover that the thing you were most afraid of losing was never your entire life. There is still a road ahead of you. Turn toward it,